Hey everyone, today I am filming a video on my experience with Tourettic OCD. Now, Tourettic OCD is different to classic OCD because classic OCD is mainly fear-based, anxiety-based, and people experience intrusive thoughts. But with Tourettic OCD, it is sensation-based, so people will have a premonitory urge before the rituals and compulsions, similar to a tic. However, the rituals in Tourettic OCD do look identical to classic OCD, and they can be debilitating. Physically. However, I think classic OCD is debilitating also mentally and emotionally. But the treatment options are also different. Classic OCD is treated through CBT and ERP. CBT is cognitive behavioural therapy, and ERP is exposure response prevention. But these are ineffective for Tourettic OCD because it isn't thought-based, and ERP may make it worse due to the suppression element. So, in my own experience, I had quite severe Tourettic OCD between the ages of 8 and 12 years old, and I remember it was quite abrupt. I went into my parents' bedroom one evening and started flicking the light switch on and off for a reason that I couldn't explain. And then the next day onwards, it just exploded, and my rituals took over 8 hours out of every day. So it was debilitating, and it's just as debilitating as classic OCD, just in a slightly different way. And I think that my rituals included toilet rituals, which was where I would sit on the toilet for about 40 minutes procrastinating from doing the rituals because I didn't really want to do them. They were exhausting and debilitating. And I also would then I would say shut up, shut up, shut up 3 times, and then I would have to tense my stomach to make sure that all my pee was out. And then I also had the hand washing rituals, and the hand washing rituals were where I would wash my hands for ages, hours at a time, and it would sometimes in the evening get to about 3 AM and I'd have to be dragged out kicking and screaming because I just couldn't stop. And thankfully my doctor did give me some hand sanitizer to try and bypass this ritual, and thankfully that did work for a while. And I also had hand drying rituals, which is where I would dry my hands in the sequence 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Again, unable to stop. And these rituals did get so debilitating to the point where I was unable to use the toilet in my home and had to use public toilets every evening. I also had dressing rituals, which was where I would click my clothes, I would whack them on the floor, I would pull them up and down, like pull my trouser skirt up and down, and this would take ages. And I'd also roll about on the floor, kicking myself at the same time because it included tics as well, and I just rolled about on the floor unable to dress myself, and that took ages. And then my parents would have to dress me then as well. And I also had a ritual where I would scrape the back of my ankles onto the fireplace, run across the room, jump over a certain area of the floor that I said there was an invisible barrier there, and then my dad would have to carry me up the stairs, but that hurt his back. And I would also have issues where shoes. Putting shoes on was a massive thing. When I was putting my shoes on, I would whack them against myself, and that took ages, and I can insert a video of that here. And then I would also straighten my shoes for ages, and if they were straight then they were too perfect, but if they were wonky then they weren't straight enough. And then I would have to do the same with pencils as well, which took ages. And I did have some classic OCD traits. With the classic OCD trait at that time, it was an obsession with something called an old thing, and every time I saw or came into contact with a perceived old thing, I would go, old thing, old thing, old thing, and I would make an alarm sound, and then my symptoms would get a lot worse, and I'd also tap things quite a lot. I can insert a video here. after this, I also experienced banging things. I would bang lamps, I would bang cups, I would bang anything, and I once would bang a laptop on the floor so much that it snapped in half, pretty much, with just the wires connecting. It was just flat. And I also, it was difficult to use a computer or a laptop because I had a compulsion where I'd have to scroll up and down and hit the little thing at the edge to the top of the screen over and over again, and sort of tap that as well. And I think sometimes I'd whack the mouse as well. I'm not too sure. I might have whacked that down. But I had a lot of compulsions. I'm sure some of them I can't even fully remember. But whenever I was coming out of a car, I would have to wipe my arms on it. I can insert a video of that. And it was just debilitating because it got to the point where I was late to school a lot of the time because it took me ages to get ready in the morning because of these rituals. And thankfully, I think my school were understanding, but that's because my mum went in and broke down crying because it's frustrating and it is horrible to see your child like that, and I understand that. And it got to that point, and then my school were understanding, but they can be quite strict about attendance. But they couldn't really, my parents couldn't really tell them all the details because I wasn't comfortable with them sharing it at the time, because I was very closed off about it. And I also, it affected my eating because I had a compulsion where I would try to eat sweet wrappers, and then my rituals would be so time consuming that I wouldn't really have time to eat either. And I was also often late to bed, so I was quite sleep deprived, as I said, like 3 AM dragged to bed because the toilet rituals, it's horrible. But yes, that was a massive issue. I went to have CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, but they said that I had a limited insight to the cognitive aspect of my OCD, but the truth was that it wasn't really there because it was Tourettic OCD. So they also said that this can't be classic OCD because Romy can stop rituals without anxiety. However, it was physically uncomfortable. So that's when they realised it couldn't really be classic OCD. But they also, for a while, said that I may be concealing my intrusive thoughts, which some people do, but it is just that I didn't have them at that time. And I would often get asked, like, what would happen if you didn't do this? And I was very confused because I was like, well, obviously nothing would happen, but I have got experience now with classic OCD as well, but at the time I was very confused. Because I knew nothing would happen if I didn't do these rituals. It was just I couldn't control it. It was involuntary. And I was trying to explain the sensation to them. I was like, well, I guess I feel sick. And they're like, oh, so you'll get sick if you don't do the ritual. And they were trying to do it from there, but it's only that I would feel sick because the urge would build up, and that was so uncomfortable for me. But yes, we did do ERP, and it seemed to work for a while. However, it did have sort of rebounds and rage attacks. It caused a lot of rage attacks. So that was a massive issue, and I think that whenever it would start working, it would suddenly get worse again. So unfortunately, my parents, I think they did waste some money on therapy because it didn't seem to work in the long run, and the CBT wasn't very effective because it wasn't thought-based. But for me, the premonitory urges that actually preceded the rituals were phantom tics, which were out-of-body sensations, and these out-of-body sensations would stick to things. They were on my hands, they were on my arms, they were around my clothes, and they would sort of encase things. They would pull me like an elastic band towards things to do the rituals, and it was incredibly uncomfortable and distressing, and it just felt like these sensations were all around me. And that sounds very strange if somebody hasn't experienced that, but there were sensations all around me and on things around me, and on the floor and everything. It was just like these things were floating around. And that was quite distressing and confusing because we didn't know what it was back then, and it was very scary for me as I was very young. I went on sertraline to try and decrease anxiety, but again, it didn't decrease the rituals because it wasn't classic OCD, but thankfully it did really help with my anxiety levels because I remember my year 4 teacher apparently phoned and said, what's happened to Romy? She's talking, because I was really socially anxious when I was younger and didn't really talk to anybody, so sertraline did really help with my confidence and self-esteem. But it didn't help with the rituals, which were the big problem at that time. So thankfully at the age of 12 I went on risperidone, which was an antipsychotic that did stop the rituals, and thankfully now I no longer have the Tourettic OCD rituals because I manage my condition through diet, and ever since eliminating my allergens I never ever had the rituals back, and I have been able to come off the antipsychotic medication.